Chapter 1. The Forest. In the heart of the great woods of Ihatov, where the trees whispered ancient secrets to one another, a child named Guskō Budori was born. His father, Guskō Budori, was a woodcutter of great renown, whose axe sang through the mightiest of trees as though they were but saplings swaying in a gentle breeze. Budori had a sister, Mire, and together they roamed the verdant depths of the forest. They would venture so far that the rhythmic song of their father's saw became but a faint echo carried on the wind. In those distant glades, they would pluck wild berries, cool and sweet, and dip them in crystal springs. Lying upon the soft moss, they would take turns mimicking the mournful coo of the wood doves until the very birds themselves answered drowsily from the boughs above. When their mother sowed barley in the small plot before their dwelling, the children would spread a simple mat upon the path and sit, brewing orchid blooms in tin vessels. As they played, birds of every hue would swoop overhead, their wings a whisper of greeting as they passed. When Budori began his lessons at the village school, the forest grew lonely in the daylight hours. But as the sun began its descent, Budori and Mire would return, their laughter a melody among the trees. With red clay and charcoal, they etched the names of trees upon their bark, and their songs echoed through the leafy canopy. Upon a birch where hop vines had formed a natural archway, they inscribed, "No passage for the cuckoo bird." Time passed, as it is wont to do in the quiet places of the world, and Budori saw 10 summers, while Mire counted 7. But that year, a strangeness fell upon the land. The sun, usually a warm golden orb, shone pale and sickly. The kabushi trees, which normally burst with white blossoms as the snows retreated, remained barren. Even as May drew nigh, sleet fell in bitter showers, and July passed without the touch of summer's warmth. The barley, sown with such care the previous autumn, yielded naught but empty white husks. Most of the fruit trees shed their blossoms fruitlessly. As autumn's chill crept in, the chestnut trees bore only green, prickly burrs, and the precious grain called oriza, the staple of their simple fare, failed to sprout a single kernel. A great unrest spread across the land, as though the very earth had forgotten how to nourish its children. Budori's parents journeyed often to the plains, bearing loads of firewood, and in winter they hauled great logs to the town on sleds. Yet they returned with only meager portions of barley flour, their faces etched with worry. Though they weathered that harsh winter, the following spring brought no relief. The carefully hoarded seeds were sown, but the year unfolded as a mirror of the last. As autumn's golden mantle spread across the land, true famine gripped the forest realm. The schoolhouse stood empty, its lessons unheard. Budori's parents ceased their labors, their whispered conversations fraught with concern. They would journey to town, sometimes returning with a handful of millet grains, other times with naught but hollow eyes and sunken cheeks. The family subsisted on acorns, the roots of kuzu and warabi ferns, and the tender bark of trees. Thus they endured the bitter months, as winter's icy fingers clawed at their humble abode. As spring's first tentative buds appeared, Budori's parents seemed afflicted by a malady most grievous. One day, his father sat for hours, head clasped in his hands, lost in deep contemplation. Suddenly, he rose, his movements unsteady. "I shall go to the forest to seek solace," he declared, his voice a mere whisper of its former strength. He stumbled from their dwelling, vanishing into the shadowy depths of the woods. As darkness fell, he had not returned. When the children inquired of their mother about their father's whereabouts, she could only gaze upon them, her eyes brimming with unspoken sorrow. As twilight painted the forest in hues of deepest black the following eve, their mother rose with sudden purpose. She stoked the hearth until flames danced merrily, casting a warm glow throughout their humble abode. "I must search for your father," she said, her voice trembling like a leaf in autumn's chill. "Remain here and partake sparingly of the flour in yonder cupboard." With those words, she too ventured into the waiting embrace of the forest. The children, their hearts heavy with fear, attempted to follow, their cries echoing through the trees. Their mother turned, her face a mask of stern resolve. "Such disobedient children," she chided, before quickening her pace and disappearing into the shadowy depths. Budori and Neri wandered to and fro, their lamentations rising to the indifferent stars above. At last, overcome by despair, they plunged into the forest's inky darkness. They searched near the hop-vine archway and by the babbling spring, calling for their mother throughout the long night. The stars winked between the gnarled branches, as if whispering secrets they could not comprehend. Birds startled from their roosts, their wings a fleeting shadow in the gloom. But no human voice answered their plaintive cries. Exhausted beyond measure, the children stumbled home, collapsing into a sleep as deep as the roots of the ancient trees. When Budori's eyes fluttered open, the sun had already begun its descent from its zenith. Remembering his mother's words, he opened the cupboard to find sacks of buckwheat flour and acorns, a bounty that seemed to mock their loneliness. He roused Neri, and together they partook of the meager fare, kindling a fire in the hearth as they had seen their parents do countless times before. Thus passed a score of days in a haze of sorrow and hunger. Then, upon a morn like any other, a voice rang out from beyond their threshold. "Hello there, is anyone within?" Budori's heart leapt, thinking perhaps their father had at last returned. He bounded to the door, only to find a sharp-eyed man bearing a large basket upon his back. The stranger's gaze pierced through Budori as he reached into his burden, producing a round rice cake which he tossed carelessly towards the children. "I am come to alleviate the famine that grips this land," the man declared, his voice as rough as bark. "Come now, eat your fill." The children stood motionless, struck dumb by this sudden appearance. The man's brow furrowed, his impatience growing. "Eat! I say! Eat!" With trembling hands, Budori and Neri began to nibble at the offered morsel. The stranger watched them intently, his eyes never leaving their faces. "Good children you are," he mused, "but goodness alone will not fill your bellies or warm your bones. Come with me, both of you." He paused, his gaze flickering between the two. "Nay, the boy is strong enough to fend for himself, and I've no room for two. You, little girl, there's naught left for you here but dust and memories. Come to town with your new uncle and I'll see you feast on fresh bread every day." Before either child could protest, the man scooped Neri into his arms and deposited her unceremoniously into his basket. With a cry of, "Oh ho! Oh ho!" that echoed through the silent forest, he turned and fled, swift as a startled deer. Neri's wails of anguish pierced the air, mingling with Budori's desperate cries of, "Thief! Thief!" The boy gave chase, his feet pounding against the earth, but the stranger was fleet of foot. Soon, he had vanished beyond the forest's edge, leaving only the faintest echo of Neri's sobs carried on the wind. Budori ran until his legs could carry him no further, his voice hoarse from shouting. At last he collapsed at the forest's border, his small form racked with sobs that shook the very ground beneath him. Chapter 2. The Celestesilk Factory. As Budori's eyes fluttered open, a peculiarly flat voice assailed his ears from above. "At last you stir from slumber. Do you still fancy yourself amidst the famine? Rise and lend me your aid, lad." Budori beheld a figure clad in a chestnut-hued mushroom cap, a coat draped over a simple shirt. In his hands dangled a contraption of wire, its purpose as enigmatic as the stranger himself. "Has the famine truly passed?" Budori inquired, his voice trembling with hope and trepidation. "And what manner of aid do you seek?" "Web-casting," came the cryptic reply. "Here? You would cast webs in this place?" "Indeed we shall." "To what end do we weave these webs?" "To nurture the Celestesilk worms, of course." Budori's gaze wandered to the chestnut tree before him, where two men perched upon ladders, their movements frantic as they hurled and manipulated invisible nets with fervent dedication. Can one truly rear Celestesilk worms thus? Budori marveled, his eyes straining to glimpse the gossamer threads. Aye, we can, the stranger retorted, his patience wearing thin. What a bothersome child you are! Mind your tongue, lest you bring ill fortune upon us. Why would we build a factory where Celestesilk worms cannot thrive? Many a soul, myself included, ekes out a living from this very trade. I see, Budori managed, his voice but a whisper. The stranger's tone grew stern. Know this, lad. I have purchased this entire forest. You may stay and assist, or you may take your leave. Though I doubt you'll find sustenance elsewhere in these lean times. Tears threatened to spill from Budori's eyes, but he steeled himself. Then I shall help. But pray, teach me the art of webcasting. Very well, the man acquiesced. He stretched the wire contraption between his hands. Observe. When extended thus, it becomes a ladder. With long strides, he approached the nearest chestnut tree, hooking the device to a low-hanging branch. Now, take this web and ascend. Go on, climb. He pressed a curious orb into Budori's hands. With no other recourse, the boy grasped the makeshift ladder and began to climb. Each rung bit into his flesh, threatening to snap beneath his weight. Higher! The man barked. Higher still! Now cast the orb, boy! Let it soar over the chestnut's crown! Hurl it skyward! Why do you tremble so? Such cowardice! Cast it, I say! Cast it now! Summoning every ounce of strength, Budori hurled the orb towards the azure heavens. In that instant, the sun turned pitch black, and the world inverted. He found himself plummeting, only to be caught in the stranger's arms. As the man set Budori upon the ground, his anger erupted like a volcano long dormant. Such a spineless wretch! Had I not caught you, your skull would have shattered upon the earth. I am the savior of your miserable life. You shall show me proper respect henceforth. His tone softened slightly. Now climb that tree yonder. We'll break our fast soon enough. He thrust another orb into Budori's trembling hands. The boy, his spirit nearly broken, carried the ladder to the next tree and cast the orb as instructed. Well done, the man grudgingly admitted. Your skill improves. Here, take these. Any chestnut tree will suffice. Waste not a moment. From his pockets, he produced a handful of orbs, pressing them into Budori's care before striding away. The boy managed to cast 3 more before exhaustion overwhelmed him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Longing for the comfort of home, Budori turned towards his humble dwelling. But lo! A startling transformation had occurred. A crimson chimney now adorned the roof, and a sign proclaiming Ihatov Celestesilk Factory hung above the threshold. From within emerged the stranger, wisps of tobacco smoke curling about him like ethereal serpents. Come, child, I've brought sustenance. Eat, and then labor until twilight descends. I've had my fill of this toil. I wish to return home, Budori protested. Home, you say? That dwelling yonder is no longer yours. 'Tis my Celestesilk factory now. I've purchased this abode and all the surrounding woodlands. Despair gnawing at his heart, Budori silently devoured the steamed bread offered by the man. With renewed vigor born of desperation, he cast 10 more orbs into the verdant canopy. As night fell, Budori curled into a corner of what was once his home, now transformed into a Celestesilk factory. The stranger and 3 unfamiliar men huddled by the hearth until the late hours, imbibing and engaged in hushed discourse. With the first light of dawn, Budori resumed his labors in the forest, mirroring the previous day's toil. A month passed, and the chestnut trees stood adorned with gossamer webs. The Celestesilk keeper then affixed boards laden with what appeared to be millet to each tree. As spring's tender buds unfurled, painting the forest in vibrant hues, tiny blue-white worms descended from the boards in orderly processions, ascending the branches with singular purpose. Budori and his fellow workers were now made to gather firewood each day. The wood soon piled up like small hills around the building. As the chestnut trees began to bloom, Their branches adorned with pale bluish, string-like blossoms, the worms that had once crawled up from the boards took on the very same hue and shape as those flowers. The chestnut leaves throughout the forest were devoured until they had lost all trace of form. Before long, the worms began to spin large yellow cocoons within the meshes of the gossamer webs. The Celestesilk keeper, seized by a manic fervor, berated Budori and the others as they gathered the precious bounty. The cocoons were plunged into bubbling cauldrons, their threads meticulously extracted by hand-cranked wheels. Day and night, the relentless whir of 3 spinning wheels filled the air as golden threads accumulated. As the storehouse swelled with shimmering strands, the remaining cocoons burst forth with great white moths. The keeper's visage twisted into a demonic mask as he labored tirelessly, enlisting 4 more hands from the plains. Yet the moths multiplied with each passing day until the forest seemed caught in a perpetual snowfall of fluttering wings. At last, a procession of 6 or 7 laden carts arrived to transport the Celestesilk to the town. As the final cart prepared to depart, the keeper addressed Budori with an unsettling grin. "Listen well, lad. I've left provisions to see you through until next spring. You're to guard the forest and factory until then." With that, he vanished down the road, leaving Budori alone amidst the desolation. The factory stood in squalid disarray, while the forest bore the scars of its ravaging as if a great fire had swept through. The following day, as Budori began to restore order to his surroundings, he discovered a weathered cardboard box beneath the keeper's favored seat. Within lay a treasure trove of tomes, their pages filled with intricate illustrations of celeste silkworms, machinery, and an array of flora. Though many of the texts remained indecipherable to him, Budori devoted himself to studying and copying the diagrams throughout the long winter months. As spring's gentle warmth returned to the land, the keeper reappeared, resplendent in finery and accompanied by 6 or 7 new underlings. The cycle of celeste silk production resumed anew. One morning, as Budori and his fellow laborers gathered firewood, the earth trembled beneath their feet. A distant boom echoed through the forest, and an unnatural darkness descended. Fine ash rained from the sky, blanketing the world in ghostly white. The Celestesilk keeper appeared, his face etched with panic. "Flee, all of you! A volcanic eruption is upon us!" The Celestesilk worms lie smothered beneath the ash. "Budori, you may remain if you wish, but I'll leave no provisions this time. The very air grows perilous. Better to seek your fortune on the plains." With those words, he vanished into the ashen haze. When Budori made his way to the factory, not a soul remained. Disheartened, he trudged across the white ash, already traced with the footprints of the others, making his way toward the waiting plains beyond. Chapter 3. The Mire Fields. Budori trudged through the ash-laden forest for half a day, his steps leading him towards the distant town. With each gust of wind, the trees shed their ashen burden, creating a spectral dance of smoke and snow. As he neared the plains, the ashen blanket thinned, revealing glimpses of verdant life beneath. At last, the forest's edge yielded to a vista that made Budori's eyes widen in wonder. Before him stretched a tapestry of breathtaking beauty, from the ground at his feet to the alabaster clouds on the horizon. It seemed as though some divine artisan had woven the landscape from cards of peach, emerald, and ash. Upon closer inspection, the peach-hued sections revealed themselves as fields of low-growing flowers, abuzz with industrious bees flitting from blossom to blossom. The emerald patches were dense carpets of grass, their delicate spikes reaching skyward. The ashen areas were shallow, muddy swamps. Each section was delineated by narrow, low-lying embankments, where men labored with horses, tilling and churning the earth. As Budori wandered this patchwork realm, he came upon 2 men engaged in heated discourse in the middle of the path. The one to the right, sporting a russet beard, declared with conviction, "Come what may, I've set my mind to play the part of a speculator." His counterpart, a tall elder adorned with a white cap retorted, "Cease this folly! An abundance of fertilizer may yield bountiful straw, but nary a grain shall you harvest." "Nay," the red-bearded man countered, "my foresight tells me this year's heat shall match that of 3 past. I'll reap a 3-fold harvest in but a single season." "Desist, I say, desist!" "I'll not be swayed. The flowers lie buried, and now I'll add 60 measures of bean spheres and 100 loads of fowl droppings. Such haste! In times of such frenzy, even the tendrils of runner beans would be welcome aid." Budori, moved by an impulse he could not name, approached and bowed respectfully. "Might I offer my services, good sirs?" The 2 men started, as if shaken from a trance, and regarded Budori with hands upon their chins. Suddenly, the red-bearded one erupted in laughter. "Well met, lad. You shall tend to my horse's reins. Follow me without delay. We shall see what fortune brings come autumn. Truly, in such times even bean tendrils are a boon." As the red-bearded man strode ahead, alternating his words between Budori and the elder, the latter murmured, "Heed not the counsel of your elders, and sorrow shall surely follow." In the days that followed, Budori toiled in the mire fields, guiding horses through the murky depths. With each passing day, the peach and emerald cards of the landscape surrendered to the encroaching swamp. The horses' hooves sent sprays of muddy water cascading over the laborers' faces. No sooner had they finished one field than they moved to the next. The days stretched endlessly, until Budori could scarcely distinguish between walking and waiting. The mud felt like taffy, the water like thin soup. Time and again, the wind swept by, stirring fish-scale ripples in the nearby puddles and turning the distant waters a dull, tin-like hue. Overhead, clouds drifted lazily, their bittersweet hues a tantalizing reminder of a world beyond the mire. After a score of days, the mire fields had been thoroughly churned into a quagmire. On the morrow, the master, his spirit aflame with purpose, gathered a host of laborers to plant the mire fields with emerald spears of Ariza seedlings. This task occupied them for nigh on 10 days. Upon completion, Budori and his fellows were dispatched to repay the labor debt, toiling in the fields of those who had lent their aid. Once this cycle of reciprocity was complete, they returned to their own sodden domain to wage war against the encroaching weeds. The master's seedlings flourished, their verdure so deep as to appear nearly black, standing in stark contrast to the pallid green of neighboring plots. Even from afar, the boundary between their lands was as clear as the line betwixt shadow and light. 7 days of relentless weed-pulling gave way to another round of reciprocal labor in distant fields. Yet one morn, as master and apprentice traversed their own plot, the former halted so abruptly one might have thought him turned to stone. His visage drained of color, he stared unseeing into the distance. "A plague has befallen us," he whispered, his voice scarcely more than a breath. "Does your head ail you, master?" Budori inquired, concern etching his features. "Not I, lad. The Ariza. There." The master's trembling finger indicated a nearby plant. Budori crouched to examine the leaves, and indeed, each bore crimson specks, a sight heretofore unseen. The master, his spirit crushed, made a mournful circuit of the field before turning homeward. Budori, his heart heavy with worry, followed in his wake. Upon reaching their humble abode, the master wordlessly pressed a damp cloth to his brow and collapsed upon the wooden floor. Ere long, the mistress of the house burst through the door, her voice tinged with desperation. "Speak true? Has the Ariza truly fallen ill?" "Aye," came the master's reply, hope extinguished from his tone. "All is lost." Thus concluded another chapter in Budori's journey, the verdant promise of the mire fields now tainted by the specter of blight. The land, once a tapestry of vibrant hues, now seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next turn of fate's cruel wheel. "Is there naught to be done?" the mistress implored. "I fear 'tis hopeless." "'Tis a mirror of 5 years past," the master replied, his voice heavy with despair. "Did I not warn against this folly? Did not the elder counsel restraint?" The mistress's words dissolved into sobs. Suddenly, As if struck by lightning, the master sprang to his feet, vigor renewed in his voice. Nay. Shall I, counted among the greatest farmers of Ihatov, be vanquished by such trifles? Next year shall be our triumph. Budori, lad, since joining our household, you've scarcely known true rest. Now, sleep for 5 days, nay, 10 if you will. Upon your waking, I shall perform wonders in yonder mire field. Though know this, our winter fare shall be naught but buckwheat. You've a fondness for it, have you not? With that, the master donned his cap and strode forth into the world beyond. Though Budori sought rest in the barn as bidden, his mind churned with worry for the mire fields. He found himself drawn back to that sodden realm where the master stood alone upon the embankment, arms crossed in contemplation. The field lay submerged, the Oriza barely visible above the water's surface, which shimmered with an oily sheen. I seek to suffocate this pestilence, the master declared. Will the oil vanquish the blight's seed? Budori inquired. Lad, even a man would perish if doused in oil from crown to sole, the master replied, his breath catching as he drew his neck inward. At that moment, the owner of the downstream field approached, his countenance twisted with fury. What madness possesses you to pour oil into the water? It flows unto my land. The master, his calm born of desperation, retorted, The Oriza ails, and so I anoint it with oil. Why then does it trespass upon my domain? Water flows, and oil follows in its wake. Why not stem the tide at your border? That outflow is not mine to command. The neighbor, rage rendering him mute, plunged into the water and began heaping mud to dam his inlet. The master's lips curled in a knowing smile. A contrary soul, that one. Had I stemmed the flow, he'd have raged at the impediment. By nightfall, the water shall rise to the grass tips. Come, let us return. For days hence they surveyed the field, hope dwindling with each dawning. On the 5th morn, the master declared with grim resolve, Budori, we shall sow buckwheat here. First, breach our neighbor's dam. As the oil-tainted water surged into the adjacent field, the neighbor returned, scythe in hand, his fury palpable. By what right do you flood my land with oil? The master's reply rumbled from deep within. What harm comes from flowing oil? Will it not slay the Oriza? Observe my field bathed in oil for 4 days. The red is the blight's doing, the vigor the oil's gift. Your land merely feels oil's touch upon Oriza's feet. 'Tis a boon, perhaps. Oil as nourishment? The neighbor's ire began to wane. Whether it nourishes or not, oil remains oil. That it does, the neighbor conceded, his mood lightening. As the water steadily receded, the Oriza was laid bare to the roots, blotched with red and looking as if it had been scorched. The master announced, We shall harvest now, Budori. Together, they reaped the Oriza and sowed buckwheat in its stead. True to the master's word, buckwheat became their staple through the winter months. With the coming of spring, the master spoke anew. Budori, our mire fields have diminished by 1/3, easing our toil. Now, immerse yourself in the tomes my late son once studied. Devise a method to cultivate Oriza so magnificent, it shall silence those who mocked me as a mere speculator. Budori devoured the books in every spare moment, particularly drawn to the teachings of one called Kubo. He yearned to attend Kubo's month-long school in Ihatov city. That very summer, Budori achieved a great feat, halting a nascent blight with a mixture of wood ash and salt. By mid-August, the Oriza stood proud, its stalks adorned with delicate white blossoms that transformed into pearlescent grains, undulating like waves in the breeze. The master's pride knew no bounds, boasting to all who would listen of his impending 4-fold harvest. Yet fortune proved fickle. The following year brought drought, parching waterways and cracking the swamps. The harvest barely sustained them through winter. Hope for the next season was dashed by similar aridity. With each passing year, the master's resources dwindled, forcing the sale of horses and parcels of the mire fields. One autumn day, the master addressed Budori, his voice laden with sorrow. Lad, though once I stood among Ihatov's greatest farmers, cold and drought have reduced our holdings to but a third. Come next year, we'll lack even for fertilizer. Few in Ihatov can afford such luxury now. I can no longer promise just compensation for your labors. 'Twould be a cruelty to keep you in these lean times. Take this purse, these indigo-dyed hemp garments, and these red leather shoes. Seek your fortune elsewhere, with my blessing. Though Budori's heart ached to stay, he recognized the wisdom in the master's words. With profound gratitude, he bid farewell to the Mire fields that had been his home for 6 years and set forth towards the railway station, his path to new horizons. Chapter 4. The Great Dr. Kubo. Budori walked for nearly 2 hours before reaching the station. After purchasing a ticket, he boarded the train bound for Ihatov. The locomotive thundered ahead, leaving behind a trail of marshlands and fields, while black forests emerged and vanished in the distance, their shapes shifting as the train pressed forward. Budori's heart was filled with a swirl of emotions. He longed to reach the city of Ihatov, to meet the kind Dr. Kubo, whose books had inspired him deeply. He dreamed of working and studying alongside the doctor, discovering ways to cultivate the marshlands without hardship, and to find means to ward off volcanic ash, droughts, and freezing winters. So eager was he that even the swift-moving train felt unbearably slow. By midday, the train arrived at the bustling city of Ihatov. As Budori stepped off the platform, he was momentarily overwhelmed by the strange vibrations that seemed to rise from the very ground, the oppressive air heavy with the hum of countless automobiles passing by. For a time, he simply stood there, rooted in awe. At last, he shook off his stupor and began asking passers-by the way to Dr. Kubo's school. However, everyone he asked merely chuckled at his earnest expression and responded with vague, dismissive answers. "Never heard of such a place," some said, barely suppressing laughter. "Try a few more streets down," others suggested with a wave of the hand. It was not until evening that Budori finally located the school, a large, crumbling white building. From the second floor, a loud voice echoed down to the street below. "Hello!" Budori called out, his voice ringing with hope. There was no answer. "Hello!" he called again, louder this time. Suddenly, a large ashen face appeared at a window, spectacles flashing in the dim light. "We're in the middle of a lesson, you noisy fool! If you've business here, come inside!" the figure bellowed before pulling back from the window. Inside, Budori could hear a chorus of laughter as the voice resumed its lecture, unfazed by the interruption. Summoning his courage, Budori climbed the stairs as quietly as he could. At the top, a door stood open, revealing a vast classroom filled with students from all walks of life, their gazes fixed on the tall figure standing at the front. The far wall was black as night, crisscrossed with white lines of chalk. The man, bespectacled and tall, gestured energetically toward a towering model that resembled a watchtower, his voice booming across the room as he explained the intricacies of his lesson. In that instant, Budori realized that this must be the very model described in Dr. Kubo's book, a representation of the history of history. With a smile, the doctor turned a lever and the model clicked, transforming into the shape of a fantastical ship. With another turn, it morphed again, this time into a giant centipede, its many legs poised to scurry across the ages. The students tilted their heads in confusion, clearly struggling to follow, but Budori found the entire scene fascinating. "Here we see how this figure forms," the doctor continued, his hands deftly sketching a new, complex diagram on the black wall, working swiftly with chalk in both hands. The students, eager to keep up, scrambled to copy the diagrams into their notebooks. Budori, too, pulled out his own worn notebook, smudged and stained from his time in the marshes, and began to draw the figures with care. The lecture concluded, and the doctor stood tall, scanning the room. Budori glanced around at his fellow students, one of whom let out a loud yawn beside him. Curious, Budori leaned over and whispered, "What is this teacher's name?" The student snorted derisively. "Why, it's the great Dr. Kubo, of course. How could you not know that?" He eyed Budori with a mix of pity and amusement before adding, "I've been listening to these lectures for 6 years, and even I can't grasp half of what he says." Just then, the electric lights flickered on, signaling the approach of evening. Dr. Kubo's voice rang out once more, resonating through the room. "The hour grows late, and our lesson has come to an end. As is our custom, those of you who wish to submit your notes for review may do so now, and I shall determine your standing with a series of inquiries." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as students closed their notebooks, most of them eager to leave. However, a line of 50 or 60 students formed, each one stepping forward to present their notes to Dr. Kubo. The doctor glanced briefly at each notebook, asked a question or two, and then, with a piece of chalk, inscribed a mark on their collars. Pass, return, or persevere. The students, visibly anxious, would hunch their shoulders as they left, showing their marks to their friends and either rejoicing or slumping in disappointment. At last, Budori stood alone before the doctor. Nervously, he handed over his small, dirty notebook. Dr. Kubo leaned in close, yawning as he squinted at the pages. For a moment, Budori feared the doctor might actually inhale the notebook, but instead, the doctor straightened up with a nod. "Very good. Your figures are precise, and what's this? Notes on marsh fertilizers and horse feed, I see. Now answer me this. What colors of smoke can emerge from factory chimneys?" Budori responded immediately, his voice clear and steady. "Black, brown, yellow, gray, white, and colorless, and any combination thereof." Dr. Kubo laughed, a rich, booming sound. "Colorless smoke, a sharp observation indeed. Now tell me about the shapes it can take. When there's no wind, the smoke can rise straight up like a pillar, widening at the top. On days with low clouds, the smoke ascends and spreads horizontally when it hits the cloud layer. On windy days, the column slants according to the wind's strength. Waves or breaks in the column come from the wind or the chimney's design. With little smoke, it can spiral like a corkscrew, and if the smoke is heavy with gas, it might fall from the chimney in clumps, spreading in one or more directions." Dr. Kubo chuckled again. "Excellent. And what is your profession?" "I came here to find work," Budori answered. "I see. Well, I know of an interesting job. Here's my card. Go there at once." Dr. Kubo scribbled on a card and handed it to Budori, who bowed deeply and made for the door. As Budori turned to leave, Dr. Kubo muttered under his breath, "Burning rubbish, perhaps?" He then swept up the chalk, handkerchiefs, and books scattered across the table, stuffed them into his bag, and with a swift motion vaulted out of the window. Stunned, Budori rushed to the window just in time to see the doctor piloting a small airship, steering it across the city shrouded in a pale blue mist. As Budori watched in amazement, the airship landed on the flat roof of a distant gray building. Dr. Kubo secured the vessel and disappeared into the building, vanishing from sight. Chapter 5. The Ihatov Volcanic Bureau. Guided by the address inscribed upon Dr. Kubo's card, Budori at last found himself before an imposing edifice of ochre hue. Behind it, a towering column with a tassel-like form stood stark white against the night sky. As Budori ascended the steps and rang the bell, he was swiftly ushered into a grand chamber by an attendant who had but glanced at the proffered card. Within, a table of unprecedented magnitude dominated the space. At its center sat a distinguished gentleman, his hair touched by the silver of wisdom, intently writing while a curious device was pressed to his ear. With a mere gesture, he bade Budori sit, never pausing in his scribbling. The right wall bore a magnificent model of Ihatov in its entirety, a tapestry of color depicting railways, towns, rivers, and plains with startling clarity. The central mountain range, like a great spine, and the coastal ranges that rimmed the land were adorned with lights of red, orange, and yellow. These luminous beacons pulsed and changed, emitting sounds akin to cicadas' songs, while numbers flickered in and out of existence upon their surfaces. Beneath this wondrous display, shelves lined with countless black devices, not unlike typewriters, clicked and whirred in an intricate dance of data. As Budori stood entranced, the gentleman set aside his curious earpiece and produced a card of his own. "You must be Guskō Budori," he said warmly. "I am Pennin, chief engineer of the Ihatov Volcanic Bureau." Noting Budori's nervous demeanor, Pennin continued with kindness. "Dr. Kubo's telephone message heralded your arrival. You shall work and study here, in a role of great import. Our task, though new, is vital, for we labor in the shadow of slumbering giants that may awaken at any moment. The caprices of volcanoes oft defy mere academic understanding. We must remain ever vigilant." On the morrow, Pennin guided Budori through the labyrinthine building, elucidating the purpose of each marvelous contraption. Every device within was linked to the 300-odd active and dormant volcanoes scattered across Ihatov. They recorded not only visible signs of activity, smoke, ash, and lava flows, but also the subtle stirrings within seemingly quiet mountains. Changes in magma chambers and gas compositions, even minute shifts in a volcano's shape, all were transmuted into figures and diagrams. When significant changes occurred, the model erupted in a symphony of distinct tones. Under Pennin's tutelage, Budori immersed himself in the art of operating these wondrous machines and interpreting their cryptic messages. His days and nights were consumed by work and study in equal measure. As 2 years passed, Budori found himself venturing forth to install new equipment on distant peaks or to mend those devices that had succumbed to the harsh volcanic environment. In time, the workings of Ihatov's 300 volcanoes became as familiar to him as the lines upon his own palm. Indeed, Ihatov's volcanic tapestry was a complex one. 70-odd mountains belched smoke and poured forth lava daily, while 50 more, though dormant, exhaled various gases and birthed scalding springs. Among the remaining 160 slumbering giants, some harbored the potential for sudden awakening. One fateful day, as Budori worked alongside the venerable Pennin, the instruments suddenly came alive with data from Sanmutori, a coastal volcano to the south. Pennin's voice rang out with urgency. "Budori! Sanmutori showed no signs of unrest this morn, did it not?" "Indeed, sir. I've never witnessed activity from Sanmutori before," Budori replied, his eyes fixed on the dancing needles. "Ah, an eruption looms near. This morning's earthquake must have roused it. The city of Sanmutori lies but 10 kilometers to the north. Should it erupt, I fear a third of the mountain's northern face may be obliterated. Boulders the size of cattle and tables, mixed with scorching ash and gas, shall rain down upon the city. We must act swiftly, drill into the seaward side to create a vent, allowing gas or lava to escape. Come, we must inspect it at once." With haste born of urgency, the two gathered their equipment and boarded a train bound for Sanmutori, the fate of a city hanging in the balance. Chapter 6. The Sanmutori Volcano. As dawn broke, Budori and the venerable Pennin arrived in Sanmutori city. By midday, they had ascended to a small observatory nestled near the summit of Mount Sanmutori. The structure perched upon the ancient crater's rim, where it had crumbled seaward ages past. From its windows, the ocean stretched before them in bands of azure and slate, its surface etched by the silver wakes of distant steamships trailing plumes of ebony smoke. With the measured calm of one well-versed in the language of mountains, Pennin examined each instrument before turning to Budori. "How long, lad, before this slumbering giant awakens?" "A month's time it shall not endure," Budori replied, his voice tinged with certainty. "Nay, not even a fortnight," Pennin countered. "We must act with haste, lest our efforts prove futile. There," he gestured towards a patch of pale verdure upon the mountain's flank, where cloud shadows glided like spectral ships, lies the mountain's weakness. Merely 2 layers of lava shield its heart, the rest naught but soft ash and volcanic gravel. Fortune smiles upon us, for a well-trodden path to the pastures shall ease our burden of transporting materials. I shall petition for a work crew at once. As Pennon busied himself with the transmission, a faint murmur arose from beneath their feet, and the observatory creaked in protest. The old engineer abandoned his task, his face etched with grave resolve. The Bureau shall dispatch a crew forthwith. Half work crew, half sacrifice, I fear. Never have I undertaken a task so fraught with peril. Can it be accomplished within 10 days? Budori inquired, his voice barely above a whisper. It must be. 3 days for the apparatus, 5 to extend power lines from Sanmutori City's generator. Pennon's fingers danced as he calculated, his brow furrowed in concentration. At last he spoke with measured calm. Come, Budori, let us partake of tea and marvel at this vista while we may. As Budori kindled the spirit lamp, clouds gathered above, and the sea's hue shifted to a melancholy gray. White-capped waves surged towards the volcano's base in relentless procession. Suddenly, Budori's gaze caught upon a curious sight, a diminutive airship of familiar design gliding through the air before them. Pennon leapt to his feet with a cry of recognition. Ah! Kubo approaches! The vessel alighted upon a great stone wall adjacent to their shelter. From its confines emerged the towering figure of the great Dr. Kubo, who swiftly secured his craft to a fissure in the rock. I've come to partake of your tea, Kubo announced, his lips curved in a knowing smile. Does the earth not tremble beneath your feet? Pennon's reply was measured, yet tinged with concern. Not yet, but the very stones seemed to crumble and fall from on high. The air hung heavy with unspoken portent as the three figures stood united in the shadow of the slumbering giant, their fate intertwined with that of Mount Sanmutori and the city that bore its name. At that very moment, the mountain roared to life, as if awakened from an ancient slumber. Budori's vision swam with an azure haze as the earth beneath them heaved and swayed. Both the venerable Kubo and Pennon found themselves clutching the rocks for purchase, while the airship danced upon its tether like a vessel caught in a tempestuous sea. As the tremor subsided, Kubo strode purposefully into the shelter, where spilled tea and flickering blue flames of spilt alcohol greeted him. With practiced efficiency, he examined the instruments before engaging Pennon in hushed discourse. At length, he declared, "We must complete the tidal power station by next year, no matter what. With such power at our command, we could swiftly address crises like this and even realize Budori's vision of nourishing the Mire fields from above." Aye, Pennon concurred, and banish the specter of drought forever. Budori's heart swelled with hope, so much so that he felt as if the very mountain danced beneath his feet. In truth, another violent tremor had cast him to the floor. "It begins!" Kubo exclaimed. "Surely the city of Sanmutori trembles as we speak." Pennon's voice was grave as he elucidated. "A great mass of rock, perhaps 70 times the size of this shelter, has plunged into the magma chamber a kilometer north and 700 meters below us. Yet the mountain must swallow 100, nay 200 such morsels before the gas pressure can shatter its final stone skin." "Well then, I'll take my leave," said Kubo, his airship soon vanishing beyond the mountain's flank, a lantern swaying softly in farewell. Pennon and Budori maintained their vigil, alternating between fitful slumber and vigilant observation. As dawn broke and the work crew arrived at the mountain's base, Pennon descended to oversee the operation, leaving Budori alone in the shelter. The cacophony of voices and clashing metal rose intermittently on the wind, while Pennon's inquiries about gas pressure and the mountain's deformation arrived in a steady stream. For 3 days, amidst violent quakes and ominous rumbling, neither Budori nor the crew below found respite. On the 4th morning, Pennon's message crackled through. "Budori! Preparations are complete. Descend with haste. Leave the instruments calibrated, but bring all records. By afternoon, that shelter shall be no more." Budori complied, making his way down the treacherous slope. At the site, he found an imposing scaffold of iron, poised to spring to life at the mere touch of electrical current. The faces of Pennon and the crew were gaunt but resolute, their eyes bright with determination as they greeted Budori. "Now we withdraw," Pennon commanded. "To the vehicles, all of you." A convoy of 20 automobiles sped toward Sanmutori city, halting midway between mountain and metropolis. There, they erected tents and collapsed into exhausted slumber. That afternoon, Pennon's cry roused them. "The power lines are connected! Budori, we begin!" As Pennon threw the switch, all eyes turned to Sanmutori's slopes. A field of white lilies stretched before them, with the mountain's azure form looming beyond. Suddenly, the mountain's left flank shuddered. A plume of inky smoke erupted, mushrooming against the sky as golden lava burst forth, cascading towards the sea in a mesmerizing fan. The earth convulsed, lilies swaying in unison as a deafening roar swept over them, followed by a gust of wind. "Success!" they cried in unison, arms outstretched towards their triumph. The sky darkened as Sanmutori's plume expanded, and a shower of scorching pebbles clattered down from above. From within the tent, Pennon consulted his timepiece, reassuring Budori. "We've succeeded. The danger has passed. The city shall face naught but a dusting of ash." As the stone rain gave way to ash, then thinned to a mere veil, they emerged once more. The verdant field had transformed into a gray expanse, lilies buried beneath an ashen blanket, while the sky bore an otherworldly green hue. At Sanmutori's base, a new protrusion birthed an endless column of smoke. As evening fell, they ascended the mountain once more, treading upon ash and stone to install new observational equipment, their hearts both heavy with the weight of their responsibility and buoyed by their hard-won victory. Chapter 7. The Sea of Clouds. In the 4 years that followed, the grand vision of Dr. Kubo took tangible form as 200 tidal power stations arose along the coast of Ihatov. The volcanic sentinels that encircled the land were adorned with observatories and stark white iron towers, standing as silent guardians against nature's fury. Budori, now an apprentice engineer, spent the greater part of each year traversing from peak to peak, tending to the slumbering giants and working to tame those that threatened to awaken. As spring unfurled its verdant banner across the land, the Ihatov Volcanic Bureau plastered the villages and towns with proclamations that heralded a new era. "Nitrogen fertilizer shall rain from the heavens. This summer, ammonium nitrate shall descend with the rain upon your mire fields and vegetable plots. Factor this bounty into your calculations, good folk. The measure shall be 120 kilograms per 100 square meters. Rain, too, shall we summon. Fear not the specter of drought, for we shall coax forth sufficient rain to preserve your crops. Plant your seeds in fields long abandoned for want of water, for this year, hope springs eternal." As June painted the land in vibrant hues, Budori found himself atop the central peak of Ihatov, ensconced in the observatory that crowned its summit. Below, a sea of ashen clouds stretched to the horizon, punctuated by the ebony peaks of Ihatov's volcanoes, like islands in a misty archipelago. A solitary airship traversed this ethereal landscape, weaving a tapestry of white smoke from peak to peak. As time passed, the tendrils of smoke coalesced into a shimmering web that draped itself across the cloud sea. The communication device crackled to life with Pennon's voice. "The airship has returned. Preparations below are complete, and rain falls in earnest. The time has come. Begin." With a press of a button, Budori set the sky ablaze. The smoke web erupted in a dazzling display of peach, azure, and violet, pulsing with otherworldly light. As twilight descended, the cloud sea faded to an indistinct gray. Again, Pennon's voice rang out. "The ammonium nitrate has merged with the rain. The quantity and distribution are ideal. 4 more hours should suffice for this region this month. Carry on, Budori." Joy threatened to overwhelm Budori as he contemplated the impact of their work. Below the clouds, he imagined the farmers of his youth, the red-bearded master, and the neighbor who had pondered oil as fertilizer, rejoicing at the sound of life-giving rain. On the morrow, they would marvel at the vibrant green of their oryza stalks, as if awakening from a wondrous dream. As the brief summer night waned, the eastern edge of the cloud sea took on a golden hue. Yet it was not dawn, but the moon, a great yellow orb rising quietly into the sky. When the clouds glowed blue, they looked strangely pale. When they turned pink, they seemed somehow to be smiling. Budori forgot who he was or what he had been doing. He simply stared at the scene in a daze. Pennon's voice intruded once more. Thunder rumbles below. The web appears to have frayed in places. We shall cease in 10 minutes, lest tomorrow's newspapers cry foul. As Budori strained his ears, he discerned the muffled grumbling of distant thunder beneath the clouds. With a flip of the switch, the dazzling display ceased, leaving only the moon's serene light to illuminate the cloud sea as it drifted northward. Wrapping himself in a blanket, Budori surrendered to sleep. His dreams filled with visions of a land reborn through the marriage of nature and human ingenuity. Chapter 8. Autumn. That year's harvest, blessed by both favorable climate and human ingenuity, surpassed any seen in a decade. The Volcanic Bureau found itself inundated with missives of gratitude and encouragement from every corner of Ihatov. For the first time, Budori felt the true weight of purpose in his life's work. Yet fate, ever capricious, had other plans. On his return journey from Mount Ticino, Budori found himself traversing a small village nestled amidst barren mire fields, their bounty already reaped. As midday approached, he sought sustenance at a humble shop. "Have you any bread?" he inquired. 3 barefooted men, their eyes reddened by drink, occupied the premises. One rose unsteadily, his words slurred and tinged with bitter mirth. "Bread we have, but 'tis not for eating. Stone slabs they be." His companions roared with laughter, their gazes fixed upon Budori's bewildered countenance. Disheartened, Budori turned to leave, only to be confronted by a tall man with closely cropped hair. "Ho there! You're Budori, the one who rained down fertilizer with lightning this summer, are you not?" "Indeed I am," Budori replied, his tone cautious. The man's voice rose to a clarion call. "Budori of the Volcanic Bureau is here. Gather round, all!" From fields and homes, 18 farmers converged, their laughter tinged with malice. "You cur!" one spat. "Your accursed lightning felled our oryza. What madness possessed you to unleash such folly?" Budori, striving for calm, responded, "Surely you saw the posters we distributed in spring." His words were met with violence. A hand lashed out, sending Budori's cap flying. In moments, he found himself at the center of a maelstrom of fists and feet, consciousness fleeing before the onslaught. When awareness returned, Budori found himself ensconced in the sterile white of a hospital bed. Telegrams of well wishes and letters of concern adorned his bedside, a stark contrast to the pain that racked his battered form. Yet, as a week passed, vitality returned to his limbs. It was then that the truth revealed itself through the pages of a newspaper. The incident, it seemed, was born not of the Volcanic Bureau's efforts, but of an agricultural engineer's miscalculation. The man had sought to conceal his error by laying blame at the feet of Budori and his colleagues. Laughter, tinged with relief and irony, burst forth from Budori's lips. The following afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. "A lady by the name of Mire seeks audience," announced an orderly. Budori's heart leapt, wondering if he had slipped into a dream. Soon, a sun-bronzed woman, bearing the countenance of a farmer's wife, entered with hesitant steps. Though changed by the years, it was indeed Mire, the sister torn from him in the depths of the forest so long ago. For a moment, words failed them both. When at last Budori found his voice to inquire about her fate, Mire's tale unfurled in the lilting dialect of Ihatov's countryside. The man who had spirited her away had abandoned her near a small ranch mere days later. As she wandered, weeping, the ranch owner took pity on her, offering shelter and tasking her with the care of an infant. As years passed and Neri's capabilities grew, she found herself wed to the eldest son of that very ranch. This year, she explained, the gift of fertilizer from the sky had eased their labors. No longer did they struggle to transport manure to distant fields. Their turnip patches flourished nearby, while even the far-flung corn thrived, bringing joy to the entire household. Neri spoke of journeys taken with her husband to the forest of their youth, seeking traces of their old home and Budori himself. Each expedition ended in disappointment, until at last, a newspaper article had revealed Budori's whereabouts and misfortune. As Neri took her leave, Budori vowed to visit her home upon his recovery, his heart light with the promise of reunited family and the knowledge that his work, despite its occasional missteps, had indeed brought prosperity to the land he loved. Chapter 9. The Isle of Carbonado. The 5 years that followed were a tapestry of joy for Budori. He made pilgrimage to the home of his red-bearded former master, finding the man, though aged, still brimming with vitality. The master now raised 1,000 long-haired rabbits and cultivated fields of crimson cabbage, his speculative spirit undiminished and his fortunes much improved. Neri had been blessed with a son, a lad as spirited as the land itself. In winter's quiet moments, she would dress the boy in the garb of a young farmer, and, with her husband, journey to Budori's abode for nights filled with warmth and remembrance. One day, a fellow laborer from Budori's days with the silk spinner brought tidings of his parents' final resting place, a grove at the forest's edge, beneath a great kaya tree. The silk spinner, upon discovering their earthly remains, had laid them to rest with a birch branch as marker, shielding young Budori from sorrow. Without delay, Budori and Neri journeyed there, erecting a monument of white limestone, a beacon of memory Budori would visit whenever his travels brought him near. As Budori's 27th year dawned, a familiar chill crept across the land. The observatory, reading the sun's temperament and the northern sea's icy countenance, foretold the return of that dread cold come February. As spring's blossoms failed to appear, and May brought 10 days of sleet, the specter of famine loomed large in the minds of Ihatov's people. Even the great Dr. Kubo, for all his consultations with meteorologists and agronomists, found himself powerless against nature's fierce embrace. As June arrived, with Oriza seedlings still sickly yellow and trees bereft of buds, Budori's heart grew heavy with the weight of impending tragedy. Sleepless nights bred desperate inspiration. One evening found Budori at Dr. Kubo's door, his mind afire with possibility. "Doctor, would an increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide bring warmth?" "Indeed," Kubo replied. "The Earth's temperature has long danced to the tune of carbon dioxide's abundance. If the volcanic Isle of Carbonado were to erupt now, could it alter our climate?" "I've pondered this very question," Kubo mused. "Such an eruption would enshroud the globe, trapping heat and raising temperatures by perhaps 5 degrees. Can we not trigger this eruption, Doctor?" "It can be done, but at a cost. The last to leave would surely perish." "Then let me be that one, Doctor. Grant me your blessing to approach Pennon with this plan." "Nay, Budori, your youth and talents are too precious to sacrifice. Others will rise to take my place, Doctor. Brighter minds and nobler hearts will carry on our work with greater grace and skill than I. Speak with Pennon. The decision is his to make." Budori sought out the venerable engineer, who nodded solemnly at the proposal. "A noble plan, but let it be my task. At 63, what finer end could I ask for?" "But sir," Budori protested, "the outcome remains uncertain. Should the gases dissipate too quickly, or our calculations prove flawed, your wisdom would be lost when we need it most." Pennon bowed his head in silent acquiescence. 3 days hence, a vessel from the Volcanic Bureau set sail for Carbonado Isle. Towers rose and cables snaked across the volcanic landscape. As preparations reached their zenith, Budori bade the crew farewell, remaining alone upon the island's shores. The following day, the skies above Ihatov took on an ethereal emerald hue, the sun and moon transformed to burnished copper. Within a mere handful of days, warmth returned to the land. Autumn's harvest, once feared lost, proved bountiful. And so it came to pass that countless families, fathers, mothers, and children like Budori and Mire of old, found solace in warm meals and bright hearths through the winter months.